The purpose of this presentation is to talk about the earliest religious beliefs of man. It's another topic that Spodek leaves out, mainly because he assumes that you all know about this. So what we're going to do is address two of the earliest religious beliefs that were held by man, and that's the beliefs in animism and shamanism. And both of those beliefs could be held by man regardless if he was migratory or if he was settled down in the earliest river valley settlements. But one of the things that the College Board also expects you to recognize is that some of the more modern faiths that we know today actually have origins to some of these other very early belief systems that most people don't know about. So that's where we're going to begin today. Before we go any further, I want to make sure that you understand the connection between this presentation and your learning targets. On page 2, the College Board wants to make sure that you understand the connection between the cultural traits of all early agricultural villages. Well, any type of religious belief is going to adhere to the big C in our SPICE acronym, the culture of a society. And even though we tend not to think of migratory man as being any advanced form of human, they did have some of the earliest religious beliefs, and the first one that was developed during this time was what was known as animism. Most people have heard of animism, but never by its name, and it's basically where the human makes a connection to the spirit world. Every object on this planet has some kind of spiritual entity that resides within it. It plays a part in making a connection between the human and the earth. There's this connection between the two of them, and that's what animism is. The people that usually believed in animism are, as we said, migratory man, but it's also still practiced in some other parts of the world, particularly where there's indigenous native peoples. For example, Africa tends to have a good amount of animistic practices still believed, as well as areas in the Amazon in the Americas. They still practice this belief system. So animism didn't just simply die out as soon as man settled down. It continued to be practiced. As cliche as it sounds, Disney actually kind of had it right. They described animistic practices in the movie Pocahontas fairly accurately. If you recall in the movie Pocahontas, she believed that all of the spirit world was connected through living things. The trees had a spirit. And in this scene, Pocahontas is showing Adam Smith the connection to her family and to the spirit world by talking to the tree. But believe it or not, this is how animism works. The practitioners believe that every living thing has a connection, and you have to honor those living things on this earth because they serve a purpose. The tree produces the fruit for which you live upon. The cow produces the milk for which you need for sustenance. You even pray to the earth, the dirt, the soil, because it gives you crops when seeds are planted. Everything has a role on this earth and therefore must be honored and revered because of it. The second form of the earliest religious beliefs is that which is known as shamanism. Many people, though, get very confused about shamanism because they think it's actually a different religion, but it's not. It's a form of animism. What makes it interesting is that shamanism is an animistic religion, meaning you still have this belief in the spiritual world that you want to have a connection to. But in shamanism, most people of the society are not able to make the connection to the spirit world. They require what is known as the shaman, the spiritual leader that helps lead the rest of the society through rituals and through prayers to connect to the actual spirit world, to connect to the trees, to connect to the earth, to connect to the water. Okay, so every form of shamanism is animistic, but not every animistic group of people required shamans. It's for only those that believed that regular humans in the society were not special enough to make the connections to the spirit world. Again, this is typically an indigenous native group of people. Again, you're going to see a lot of them in the Amazon as well as in Africa. Those are the groups that are primarily going to be practicing this type of religious belief. However, we also can't deny the fact that in the Americas, in North America, this was also gaining a lot of popularity. So as you can see, anytime where there's going to be native peoples that still live a very simple life, somewhat migratory, are going to tend to adhere to this belief system still. Again, shamanism is not really all that different. It just means that you need a priest to help you get to the spirit world. While this slide may have some images that appear to be creepy, what I want to do is remind you of the fact that the previous slide addressed the fact that shamans also believed that in order for them to make contact with the spirits, the spirit of the water, the spirit of the sun, of the mountains, whatever it is that they chose, they often had to achieve what was called an altered state of reality. A lot of the shamans often believed that they had to essentially channel their spirit to almost leave their body in an effort to communicate with the outside world, with the spirits. They would sometimes perform dances or use instruments to help them get to that state. What's actually happening here in this image is the shaman has ingested some food products that have often caused them to hallucinate. Oftentimes mushrooms were consumed, or it's actually a drug, I guess you could call it, but it's a very natural drug called peyote. All of these were believed to cause the shaman to hallucinate and to have their brain achieve a certain level of heightenedness that allowed them to communicate with the spirit world. This is why many people that are shamanistic believe that the shaman only can achieve this. A third early form of religious beliefs that developed is that of polytheism. You've probably heard it before. Poly meaning many, and theistic meaning gods. You believe in many gods. Lots of civilizations practice this. The Egyptians practiced this. You've probably learned about it a lot in middle school. Greeks practiced this. They believed that all of their gods lived on a mountain, Mount Olympus. Romans essentially copied the same religious beliefs as the Greeks, only they didn't live on a mountaintop. Okay, one of the things that makes polytheism a really unique religion during the time and why it was much more popular than animism is that humans believed in more than one god, meaning a human-like figure. Oftentimes, the gods in most of these polytheistic religions looked like humans, they had human-like emotions, and in many cases, they interacted with the humans. You've heard of the myth of Hercules, half god, half mortal. That's because his father, Zeus, according to the myth, interacted with a female mortal who gave birth to a demigod, Hercules. In polytheistic religions, it's the idea that you, as the human, are a servant. You do not have any supernatural powers. So there are no shamans. There are priests that can help lead you in prayer, but you, as the human, are subservient. You are weaker. You have to provide altars to your gods to honor them, to please them, make offerings to them to keep them happy, and you will have a plentiful harvest. One of the things that makes this such an attractive religion, more so than animism, which is why polytheism lasted longer, is because there was more of a connection. The humans, the human-like gods, I should say, were much more relatable to the society because they looked like humans. So because of all of these things, that is why polytheism was much more of a popular religion and persisted for a very long time, while animism and shamanism became solely synonymous, I would say, with those indigenous native cultures that were out of touch with modern societies. here in this slide, we see two images that show some of the most famous altars that were made to the gods. This, from Greece, is the Parthenon. The Parthenon was a very large temple that was made to the goddess Athena to please her. She was the patron goddess of Athens, and it's the most significant building in the entire city at the time when it was built. And it was also the center of a mountaintop where it would look down upon the Agora of Athens to show the significance of that goddess. This temple here in Rome is not to be confused with the Parthenon because it's called the Pantheon. The Pantheon was also a religious temple that was made not just to one god, but to many gods. It was for any Roman that wanted to worship whichever patron god or goddess that they felt was important to them. So it was kind of the universal temple in the Roman Forum at the time. But these structures are incredibly massive. Not only do they demonstrate the power of the gods or goddesses, but they also show the reverence that the Romans and the Greeks wanted to pay to their particular gods or goddesses, to show their honor and to show their religious devotion. The larger the temple, the more you must love your god or goddess. Other ways that the ancient river valley civilizations of Rome, Greece, Egypt would often honor their gods and goddesses, other than temples, was to create statues for them. This is the Greek goddess Nike of Samothrace. Nike, yes, that's where the company gets its name from. Nike of Samothrace, as I'm writing it here, Samothrace, was the goddess of victory. That's actually what Nike means, victory. And the goddess here initially did have a head, but it was knocked off due to war and conflict and aging and whatnot. But Nike of Samothrace is one of the most famous statues to come from the Hellenistic period of Greece's artistic development. And what it does is it honors that goddess. Here we have the very famous Venus de Milo. This statue you might have seen, it's very famous. It's obviously honoring the goddess Venus of love. So again, you can see it's not just large structures to demonstrate their love and devotion, but oftentimes statues that would be scattered throughout the cities, the agoras, the forums, in an effort to remind the practitioners that they should always be revering and thinking about the gods and goddesses. The last religion on our list of the early beliefs of man is that of Zoroastrianism. You're probably thinking to yourself, Zoro, what? I have never heard of this religion ever. That's because it's only practiced in one country of the world, primarily, and that's because it originated in Iran. Back in the day, it was known as Persia. So it's a Persian religion. Why is this religion so important if it's only practiced in one country, and even then, it's not very popular even there? It's because it has origins to the monotheistic religions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Most people have never heard of this religion, so this is kind of a shocking revelation. What makes Zoroastrianism so interesting is that it mentions the idea of a creator, one creator, who is seen as a positive figure. Ahura Mazda is seen as the god of truth and light. He is a positive spiritual force. However, an evil force will come and tempt, mankind, you could call it. And its name is Angra Mainyu. Okay, so it is the opposite of Ahura Mazda. It is the negative spiritual entity. And both of them will fight for your soul. It's kind of similar to the idea of God, a creator, and Satan, an evil spirit, the devil, if you will. It's the first time in the history of religions that something similar to this has existed. If you live a pure and good life, you will go to a paradise. However, if you choose to follow the evil ways of Angramenyu, you will go to an afterlife of pain and suffering, similar to the concept of a heaven and a hell. Now, Zoroastrianism is technically considered a polytheistic religion because of the two gods Ahura Mazda and Angramenyu. However, you can't deny the similarities to the idea of a heaven and a hell and the temptation that humans will face at the hands of the evil spirit, the evil entity. So, while it's not very practiced and it's not very popular today, because Iran today is primarily Muslim, what the College Board really wants you to recognize is that this religion, even though it's technically polytheistic, does have some origins and some connections to the earliest monotheistic origins. The purpose of me showing you this slide is for you to see yet again another connection between Zoroastrianism and the early monotheistic beliefs. In Judeo-Christian teachings, meaning Jewish and Christian beliefs, both Christians and Jews believe in the importance of prophets. And many times, Jews and Christians believe in similar prophets, Moses, Abraham. Well, the first ever prophet to be discussed in the history of any religious development is that of Zoroaster, hence why it's called Zoroastrianism. So in this slide here, you can see an image of Zoroaster raising his hands into the sun as a sign of reverence, but yet he has a lot of similarities to traditional imagery that Christians and Jews have of their prophets, dressed in white for purity, the beard, which was a traditional style for men, especially during that time and in that region. So one of the things that I wanted to include, or one of the reasons why I wanted to include this slide, was so that you could see yet again another connection to Judeo-Christian beliefs. The idea of a prophet which did not ever emerge in the history of religion until Zoroaster, which you can see here. So here we go, really truly, this is it, the official last one. The last of the early religious beliefs, known as the Vedic belief system. Why is this one so significant? You can trace the origins of most early religious beliefs to a particular area. Zoroastrianism to Iran. Egyptian form of polytheism, which is unique to just Egypt. But the Vedic belief system that came to the Indian subcontinent is very unique because it's a mix. It's a mix of beliefs from a group of people known as Aryans, a group of people known as Indo-Europeans, and the Harappa that we learned about in the last flipped lesson. If you were to take the belief systems of all of these together, and record them in a series of texts, you're going to have the Vedic belief system. The beliefs of all these different groups were recorded in these texts known as Vedas, and it's those texts that form the roots of the modern-day religion of Hinduism. That is why the College Board cares so much that you understand about this faith. It's the root of modern-day Hinduism. So what particular aspects of the Vedic belief system carry over into Hinduism? The idea of the reincarnation of one's soul, that your soul will live out multiple lives until you live the purest form of a life that you can. They also believe in a lot of the same gods. Not every god from the Vedic belief system and the earliest Vedas transfers over to Hinduism, but the majority of them. So, just as Zoroastrianism is the roots of monotheism, the Vedic belief system is the roots of Hinduism in India. That's basically all that the College Board cares that you know about it at this point. Again, we will go into Hinduism in much more detail in the next unit. So this slide is really just meant to give you some kind of a visual about the type of gods that come from the Vedic belief system that have carried over into Hinduism. Probably one of the most popular that at least I know a lot more about than some of the other Hindu gods is this guy right here. He's one of my favorites. This is the god Vishnu. He can take on multiple forms depending on the situation, but he is one of the earliest gods to come from the Vedic belief system to then also be transferred over and continue to be worshipped in the Hindu faith. Here you can see the god Rama here engaging in battle. So essentially, this is just kind of meant to give you some kind of a visual. Again, we'll talk more about this in the next unit. But really what the College Board just wants you to understand is that a lot of these early religious forms are the roots of modern day faiths. Zoroastrianism to monotheism, the Vedic beliefs to Hinduism. Okay? And then animism and shamanism continued to be practiced, believe it or not, as was polytheism for a very long time. So hopefully you have a better idea about some of the earliest religious beliefs of these groups of societies, and for you to understand the cultural impact that they had as these transformed their lives through the construction of massive temples and gave these people something to live for, their faith. At this point now, you want to make sure that you click on the Google form, use the notes that you took on this presentation, as well as any learning targets, and complete the questions on the Google form.